This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Rebecca Linland from Rebecca Drives.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
So welcome back, everybody. This is episode 161, and let's jump right into vehicles, into what we're driving. So I'll just go down the list. Sam, you've been in the Cadillac CT5 Premium Luxury All-Wheel Drive 550T.
Rolls right off the tongue.
They're learning from BMW.
The car that is really good, but they really should focus on making better luxury crossovers that people pay attention to, because nobody's going to buy this. Although it's selling all right.
Yeah, it's actually not selling bad, and it's, this is an indirect replacement for the CTS, and it's actually selling better than the CTS was, I think. It launched late last year, went on sale late last year, and then obviously got stalled out in the spring. But this is their mid-size sedan, and it's actually a little bit smaller overall, a little shorter overall than the CTS was, but it has a longer wheelbase, and it's actually roomier inside than the CTS was. And I really liked driving this thing. It was really good. When
that's
we first,
everything I've heard is that it's great to drive. It's actually better than the CTS was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When we first saw this thing last year, when they first dropped some photos of it, the original batch of photos they showed before they did brought media in and showed it to us, the photos were not great, especially kind of the back quarter of the car. From the front, it looked great. The back quarter of the car, it didn't really do it justice. And when you actually see it in person, it actually looks a lot better, I think. It's got the typical fastback sedan styling now. Although it is a sedan, it's not a hatchback. If there's a flaw to the design, it's in the C-pillar area where they did this thing, because of the fastback, you have this kind of chunk in there between the back edge of the door. They didn't want to make the C-pillar look solid and heavy right there. So instead of putting in a little piece of glass there, they actually put in a piece of black plastic in that corner there, and then
they called attention to it.
Yes.
Which makes it look sort of heavy.
Yeah. So it's,
with that little funky, the weird, I don't know, dip in the trim that it does there. It's strange.
It's got a, that line, that belt line there, is very reminiscent of the current generation Honda Accord, which, it's not that it's bad, but it doesn't look original, unfortunately. But the rest of the car looks great. And once you get inside, I have no complaints about it. One of the complaints we have had about some Cadillacs of late is that the materials and the finish, the fit and finish didn't really look up to par for a premium vehicle. Some of the plastics looked a little cheaper than they should. This one definitely looked and felt better, and when I actually saw the car in person last year for the first time before the New York Auto Show last year, I got the same impression. It looks fairly premium. So, no complaints about the interior design for the most part. There are couple of little oddities, like, for example, there's actually three different volume controls on this thing. There is a volume knob at the lower left corner of the touchscreen. There's also a volume knob on the console beside the little jog dial controller. And then, of course, you have the volume controls on the steering wheel. And this has the same steering wheel that you were complaining about, Rebecca, on the XT6 last time, where they did kind of an odd layout with the forward reverse buttons and the volume controls. So the two volume switches are on the lower edge of the right-hand spoke. So you're going left and right to go up and down with the volume. And then the forward reverse buttons are towards the inner part of the spoke next to the hub of the steering wheel. So you're pressing up and down to go forward and back, and it really should kind of be the reverse of that.
Thank you for validating my feelings of inadequacy in handling that.
Yeah, no.
But, I mean, it makes sense, right? When you want to turn the volume up, you press the up button.
Right?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Exactly.
Like,
it doesn't make logical sense. It's kind of like the old, the original Audi MMI system where they had, the graphics were kind of arced. It was a circular graphical design. But
and the MMI, the stupid knob turned the wrong direction.
Exactly.
It. It's like, why? And you get the German answer, like, why would you do that? The way you do it is
that's
like,
how it is, and you will like it.
Yeah.
Right. Give me a software switch. I can adjust it. And they should do that for the volume and they can switch that in software. I guarantee you, Cadillac can switch that.
Yeah.
So that the up down rocker does volume and left right.
Except the buttons are labeled, so.
Well, that's their own fault.
I don't understand how that, and I'm digressing. How does that get past design? Are we the only ones that think that's weird?
No,
I don't get that.
There's so many decisions that happen like that. It's like, did you do human factor studies? Did you guys just get so far inside your own project that you changed something fundamental, but got so used to it that it's now a shock when everybody's first sort of attempt at operating your thing is wrong?
I think that might be part of it, but I think that there's another aspect of that, and that is that the up down buttons that you would think should be for volume, because of where they're placed towards the central part of the spoke. If your hands are on the steering wheel, it's actually quite a bit of a reach with your thumb to hit those.
Yeah.
And so they're actually less convenient to use, so you've got this area on the outer part of the spoke that's empty. There's nothing there. And then those buttons towards the inner part of the spoke, and you've got to reach over to hit those. And whereas the two volume buttons, even though they're intuitively in the wrong position, they're actually easier to use.
Mm-hmm. But wait a second, this is a GM car. Why don't they just take the steering wheel from the trucks that has the stuff on the backside of the spokes?
Because it's a Cadillac. You don't want to have that. You want to actually be able to see the buttons.
Use nicer plastic, but I love that feature.
I agree, Dan. No, I know exactly what you mean. I totally agree with you. It's very intuitive.
The problem with that is, it's actually probably really intuitive if you drive that vehicle all the time. When you jump in and out of different cars all the time, though, every time I get into a GM vehicle that has those buttons on the back of the spoke, I always hit the wrong ones. I can never remember if it's left or right for volume and for forward and back.
Right. And I think they're opposite of FCA vehicles.
Yeah.
By coincidence, I've written the car I'm going to be talking about, and I have some of the same ergonomic issues. So there'll be a theme to this show. Awesome. Unintentionally.
Yeah. Well, actually,
this is the cranky episode.
There's actually another explanation probably for why they didn't use those on the Cadillac, and that's because you can't, with paddle shifters.
They get in the way.
Can't really have the buttons on the back there with the paddle shifters. So, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But overall, that's a relatively minor annoyance. The rest of the car I really liked.
Yeah, and the solution is like a manual transmission, and then you can get the buttons on the steering wheel.
There you go.
And everything is fine.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
We've solved that issue.
But the one I drove was the Premium Luxe, and as Cadillac has done over the last couple of years, they've gone to this sort of Y configuration for their trims on all their vehicles. So you've got the base models, and then you have either Sport or Premium Luxe, which are both priced relatively the same. The Sport, obviously is geared a little bit more towards a sporty feel and, has kind of the blacked out grille and things like that. Premium Luxe is a little more traditional luxury look and feel to it. The one I had was the 550T, which in Cadillac's new parlance, the numbering now refers to the torque output of the powertrain in Newton meters. So it's roughly 550 Newton meters.
That's intuitive.
I can't wait for
the only part you have to know is, you can get the 400T or the 550T, and the 550 is more than 400.
Yeah.
The 400 is four-cylinder.
Yeah. To be fair, Buick used to put the torque numbers on their air cleaners back in the day, but like Newton meters, I can't wait for this to get into the dealership and have people talking about nanometers instead of Newton meters. I'm like, great. No, that's a completely different thing, but whatever.
I mean, did you feel like you were driving a Cadillac when you drove it, though?
I mean, what does a Cadillac feel like anymore?
Well, that's part of the tragedy, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, compared to the Cadillacs when I was growing up, no, it doesn't feel anything like that.
That's probably good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Right.
I mean, when I was in high school, playing water polo, one of my teammates was driving an old, like a 71 or 72 sedan DeVille with a 500 cubic inch V8 that made a.
That is a fine automobile.
It was brown. This thing was massive.
Awesome.
It was brown before
we all
was
piled
popular,
into this
though.
thing to go to games. It was. But when you go over a bump or railroad tracks or something, it would wallow and bouncing up and down for about 5 minutes before it finally settles.
It's giving you water polo practice.
Aquatic experience, right? I was going to say water polo.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to tread water in it.
Yeah, it was like being in a waterbed. No, I mean it feels like a modern Cadillac, which is a good thing. It feels even as the premium looks, it feels nice and buttoned down and well controlled. Good body control, good ride quality. Really nice balance of ride and handling. I think it's a really nice premium car, and the 550T means that you've got the twin turbo V6, the 3-liter twin turbo V6 with 335 horsepower, and plenty of power. Really good. Felt really good to drive.
Is that the only? I think that's the only CT5 besides the V series. So that's like the only regular CT5 you can get with that engine. I don't think you can't get it in the Sport, right?
I think you can get it. I think you can get it in the Sport. I believe you can get the V6 in the Sport, but the 10-speed automatic transmission, in all the applications where GM has used this transmission, this is the one that they developed with Ford. I think GM across the board has done a better job calibrating this transmission than Ford has. It's very smooth and seamless. It doesn't feel like it's constantly shifting around trying to figure out what gear it should be in. They've done a better job on their controls than Ford did. I drove it out to Grand Rapids and back to go visit with May Mobility out there. It's about 100 miles each way. The seats are really comfortable, supportive. This one that I had, had the full gamut of driver assist features. So it had the adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist. GM's lane keeping assist, does not even make any pretense towards trying to do lane centering. That is strictly the province of Super Cruise. Super Cruise is coming to the CT5, but not until like early next year. It was supposed to have launched by now, but because of the pandemic, they had some supplier issues, so they had to push back the launch on the CT5 and CT4 until early in the year. The Escalade will be getting it right after launch, so it'll have Super Cruise this fall. So I haven't had a chance to try the second generation Super Cruise yet, but the adaptive cruise control worked great. There's a nice big heads-up display in this one, so you've got all your information right in front of you. It also had the digital camera mirror system, which this is an upgraded version from the original. It's got higher resolution and higher frame rate than the original version did when they launched it a couple of years ago on CT6 and Bolt. So it looks a little more natural. And I after driving that, on the CT5 and then this week on the Silverado that I'm driving, I really wish I'd had that feature in the Corvette the week before, because that would have been a great feature to have in the Vet, to actually have some rear visibility. But it's a really good car, and the starting price for the CT5 is about $35,000 or $36,000. The one I had was priced out. The all-wheel drive, which mine had, starts at about 41 for the all-wheel, or for the premium Lux, rather than all-wheel drive. Fully optioned out, delivered. This one was 59,365. Which, is not cheap, but, I think that it's very competitive with something like a BMW or Audi, like a 3 Series, or certainly compared to a 5 Series. A 5 Series with this kind of level of equipment would be significantly more. 3 Series probably pretty comparable, and the an Audi, this would probably be, I guess, like maybe a little smaller than an A6, between an A6 and an A5, they would certainly be more expensive than this. So, I think it's definitely something that people should be considering if they're looking for a premium sedan.
How does it go down the road though? Does it, because the last Cadillac I had was the XT4, and I quite liked the way it drove. It was really disciplined, and it rode and handled well. It was, a little loud. The 4-cylinder wasn't great, but this, in this configuration, you've got the V6. So that's probably a lot more refined feeling. And I'm assuming it still has the same kind of attention to the ride and handling balance. Cadillac seems to be doing pretty well that way.
Yeah, the driving dynamics were great. The V6 is definitely way more refined than the 4-cylinder. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to get a CT5, if you can swing it for the V6, definitely go for that over the base 4-cylinder, because the 4 is the same one that's in the XT4, although it's turned 90 degrees.
And that's a good engine. It's just like you hear it.
It's just not as refined as it should be for for this price point and this level of car. I do have to call out one issue with this, and I reached out to Cadillac and haven't heard back, about whether the car I was driving was a pre-production model or not, or a regular production version, because there was one quality issue, which is the driver's side rear door was not particularly well aligned, and given how much we've called out Tesla on their, panel gaps and things like that, it would, I have to call out GM on this one. We'll include a picture of this in the show notes. But the rear door on the driver's side was, you could see, when you look in the driver's side, on the outside mirror on the driver's side, you could see where it steps up a little bit, the chrome trim around the windows. You could see that it wasn't lined up correctly. And I think that was also leading to a little bit of excess wind noise that I was noticing on that side of the car when driving at highway speeds.
Was there any evidence of accent or anything like that?
Nothing noticeable. I mean, there was no scuffs or anything. I think it was just not built right.
How many miles were on it?
About 2,000 miles.
Oh, yeah, so
not a lot.
Right.
So it was a fairly new car.
Yeah.
Well, it happens.
Yep.
Sometimes they build bad ones.
Yeah, and if I was going to the dealer and taking delivery of the car, and I saw that, I would not take delivery of the car until they fixed it.
Well, since one of our listeners, Blake, called us out as favoring GM and Ford, I think that kind of stuff that can't happen anymore.
What we favor GM and Ford?
I know.
That's nonsense.
I know.
Crap.
But hi, Blake. But
We'll come back to Blake later on.
Yes, I know. But as you say, we call out Tesla a lot on this kind of stuff. But this is sort of that 70s, 80s GM that's not okay. Hopefully it is pre-production though.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen flaws like this in other cars too. And,
for sure.
We try to call it out when we notice it.
Yeah, no, I had another menu. I had a Nissan that had a really pretty egregious, it was incredibly noticeable. And I think they pulled it from the fleet as well. They should.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Interior wise, you said that it felt and looked better. Did you have a color in there, or did they do the normal black.
No, this one had the Sedona interior with Sedona leather with jet black accents.
Because they did a nice job naming colors. Like they have like maple sugar. That just makes me want to pick it. You know, like, and it does. I think that's an area. The interior design is really nice on it. I do like the the ergonomics maybe aren't maybe there's a little too much touchscreen, but it looks like there's a row of buttons down below.
Well, I mean, compared to a lot of stuff out there, I mean, this, it's a good size touchscreen. It's a 10-inch display, but this is nothing. It at least does have physical controls for the climate controls, things like that. That's all buttons, and it's basically just the nav and the audio that's in the touchscreen. Everything else has physical controls. And
that's not terrible.
And you can use that central control knob to do a lot of the stuff that's in the touchscreen anyway. So,
all right. So,
and there's also a huge back seat, which is always a good thing.
And it's I'm sorry, I was thinking of the XT6 or XT5 that we had before. So the back seat is a nice.
Yeah, it's very, very roomy in the back. And one other thing, just glancing at my photos, one thing that I really do appreciate is, the front seats have adjustable thigh bolsters. So depending on, the proportion of your hip to knee length, in some cases, like, I have fairly long thighs and I like to have a little bit longer distance, a little more support under my thighs when I'm driving. And so being able to stretch that out, is nice, but still have it be adjustable so that, somebody with Rebecca's proportions, would also fit well. No,
that's actually a really good point though, because as you mentioned before, you drove 100 miles each way. That is wearing. If you are not comfortable, if that seat isn't giving you the type of support that you need, that's where a car gets really tiring to be in. It's after a while.
I felt completely refreshed after 4.5 hours in the car.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Did it have ventilated seats?
It did have heated and ventilated seats. Obviously, the heating I didn't use on on a 90+ degree day, but I did use the ventilated seats, and those are always nice to have as well.
Well, the ventilated seats I've only had them be useful or effective in a few cars.
No.
They're more. No,
I love them.
They work better for you,
especially after after I'm coming back from working out like a Soul Cycle. Oh yeah, that's happiness.
On a hot sunny day, when you first get back into the car, before the air conditioning really cranks up and starts blowing out cold air, having those ventilated seats, get a little bit of cooling going, right away on your backside, especially if you've been walking around outside, is definitely feels really good.
Yeah. And on those black interiors, especially as you say, like in that sun, putting that on, it does. It makes a big difference. I mean, I think more and more, we're seeing them in more and more cars of all different price points, that the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid had them, which I thought was fantastic.
All right. I mean, it sounds like Cadillac has finally hit its stride just in time for them to be making the complete wrong car for the market.
As long as they can carry this through to the stuff that they're doing going forward, I think in the next year or two we'll see an update to the XT5. Certainly the Escalade coming out. It's actually on sale now. They've already started delivering those, and getting into the cars like the Lyric. Then I think they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think we have to think about globally. They sell Cadillacs in a lot of other places as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Cars like the CT5, are still more popular in China than they are here.
Right. Yeah, but I thought even this CT5 with a longer wheelbase but shorter overall, isn't this kind of small for that market? Don't they prefer longer sedans? Not maybe larger, but longer?
Yes and no. I mean, they also like, the compact to midsize sedans, and this is why, for example, in China, you'll find, long wheelbase versions of the BMW 3 Series and 5 Series. because they still like to have something that is maybe a little bit narrower, not quite as enormous as a 7 Series or an S-Class,
Right.
but but they want that extra rear room. So you find those extended wheelbase versions, and I think the proportions of this car will probably be a better fit. I mean, they used to offer a long wheelbase CTS purely for the Chinese market. So I think that this car will actually be a better fit in China than the CTS was.
And remember that the Genesis G70 that I had last week, that actually had the buttons on the passenger side that the driver could adjust to move up the seat for the person sitting diagonally, behind the passenger in the back row. I mean, that was clearly designed for a limo type driver to be able to adjust that seat, because they were just
give them that maximum room.
Yeah, it was just right on the side there. I mean, it actually worked out really well, because somebody was getting into the back of my car that was a lot taller, and I was like, "Here, let me help you out," and I was able to move that seat up, which was kind of cool, But it reminded me very much that, especially obviously in Korean and other Asian markets, that's that size vehicle, what we would consider a 3 Series sports sedan, is often used, to ferry dignitaries around and such. So I think it makes sense.
I mean, anytime I'm driving, I'm ferrying a dignitary around.
Anytime.
So, it's amusing to me in a sense that they feel that they can't just make one car with a long wheelbase. They have to make a short one for us and then a long one for everyone else. I don't know. Like, I wouldn't mind a longer wheelbase car either. So,
well, now you have one.
Yeah. All right. Well, so speaking of China, you had the Chinese-Swedish Volvo XC90.
I did. And, this was probably one of my favorites. I mean, I did love that little XC60, or the XC30 rather. But, I've had I haven't had a steady positive experience with all the Volvos that I've had. And so this was I really enjoyed the XC90. I will be the first one to admit that I'm very partial to the design of it. I think it's just really handsome. It's really masculine. I like the squareness of it. It looks like an SUV. My brother is car shopping, and he's a big tall guy, and we talked about like the Ford Escape, and I'm like, it's too girly for him. He'll look like he's driving his wife's car. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you want that kind of, you want something that's muscular, handsome. I don't know. That's what I think of when I think of the XC90. And so from the exterior standpoint, it's always been really appealing to me. I like that tall stance that it has, very square grille. And I think they've done just a really nice job on the design evolution of this particular product, especially. So, Sam, I wanted to ask you though, as an engineer, because this was really surprising to me, and I just verified it again. This thing had a 2.0 liter 4-cylinder. Now it gets 316 horsepower. It's supercharged and turbocharged, but with an 8-speed automatic. I never felt like that thing was underpowered, and I can't believe it only had a 2.0 liter 4-cylinder. What is the supercharge and turbocharge doing for me that I didn't feel like this thing was straining?
Yeah, so the modern generation of Volvos, ever since they revamped the entire lineup after getting acquired by Geely, are all powered by this 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, by variants of this engine. So there's base naturally aspirated versions.
Okay.
They also still have some diesels as well, but those have never been offered here. But there's naturally aspirated versions overseas. There's a version that has just a turbo, which is the T5.
Okay.
T6 has the turbo and the supercharger.
And that's what I had. I had the T6.
Right.
Okay.
And then the T8 is that same engine, and then with an electric motor on the rear axle for the plug-in hybrid.
Okay.
So the supercharging, the advantage to supercharging, because it's mechanically driven, Turbos work by, the exhaust gases. When you step on it, the exhaust gas spins up the turbine, which is on a shaft of the compressor, which then blows air and forces air into the engine and makes more power. There's inherently some lag with a turbocharger.
Right, the turbo lag.
Because you've got that delay between when you build up the exhaust gas pressure, spins up the turbine, and then forces the air from the compressor side in. So a mechanical supercharger is belt driven off the engine, and it's immediate. So as soon as the engine starts to rev up, it's building boost pressure immediately. There's no lag. The downside of that is that there's more friction, more parasitic loss. So the faster a supercharger spins, it'll keep forcing more air into the engine, but it's also consuming power, and so it's less efficient. So using the combination of the supercharger, you can use the supercharger initially to get that initial burst of boost into the engine for better responsiveness. And then as the turbo pressure builds up, then you can declutch. There's a clutch on the supercharger. You can decouple the supercharger, so you're reducing that friction, and you're just using the turbo. And then that way you can size the turbo more for the high end, so you get more top end boost and higher peak power and torque. But again, when you go to a larger turbo like that increases the lag. So you can use a smaller turbo for less lag, but then you limit your top end power. So this gives you a broader spread of power and better responsiveness overall.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But
there are some times where you can feel the lumps and bumps a little bit. They've done a really good job at smoothing it out, but there's sometimes you can catch that engine in the wrong spot.
You can. And I definitely had that sometimes. I did play around with the different modes as well. And dynamic mode was definitely, the most fun, but it was interesting. I was running a little bit low on gas, and I always try and leave them with at least a quarter of a tank because I'm not an asshole. And so
at least enough gas to get back to the garage, right?
And I actually, I when the guy called to let me know he was on his way, I told him, I said, I can run and get gas because it was about 60 miles left. But I think in eco, and I actually had on the highway, I drove 20 miles on the highway, and I still had that 60 miles when I left my house, which was really pretty impressive, I thought. There was every once in a while, I would say, when I was like trying to get onto 95 and merging onto the highway, that I would feel like it was maybe a scooch underpowered. But yeah. Overall, it really was very,
that is a big, heavy vehicle.
Well, that's the thing. It's
300 horsepower.
It was, I was very, very surprised when I discovered that it was only 4-cylinder, because it certainly behaved like a 6-cylinder. I apologize. I meant to grab my fuel economy. It's rated at 18 city, 26 highway, and 21 overall. And I would say I was pretty close to that. But, generally it was a really, really good experience. I had a couple of funny things related to what we were talking about earlier, ergonomically. So it doesn't have a traditional stop-start button. It has a knob, and it very reminiscent of the Saab ignition, key ignition from all those years ago.
They had the key down on the
remember?
console instead of on the column. Yeah.
But this has the start knob in the center console, which I never got used to. And it was funny because my brother Larry was visiting from California. We were doing a lot of house stuff, and so he and I were in the car a lot together. And he would always laugh. He's like, you like every single time I would get in, and I'd end up tapping, the area behind the steering wheel where the button is supposed to be. And then I would have to move my arm back. I'm like, oh, that's right. That's where it is. And then the way that you activate the different dynamic modes, it's like a little barrel button. I don't remember what I called it.
It's like a little roller.
Yeah, the
switch.
roller. Yeah. But again, that's in the center console. And I found myself distracted as I looked at the screen to move into on the fly, move into the different modes. And then I wasn't always sure that I was actually in that mode. It was something that I found it distracting to change on the fly, which is a little surprising for Volvo because they're so, conscious of safety. The other thing that there was from an ergonomic standpoint, because Volvo wants to keep you safe, they expect you to put your phone away. The reality is nobody does that anymore. And so there wasn't a good place to put my phone. So the cup holders had to serve as a phone, which can be distracting, as opposed to having it like in those nice little wireless charging pads that some people have put in there. And then I've had this on other Volvos also. The voice control, like the voice that responds, is so robotic and not natural sounding that it's so jarring because you're in this beautiful, very calming, very Swedish environment with soft Napa leather, beautiful. This one had this metal mesh aluminum cool stuff, and it's all, and then this like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 comes on. It's like, oh yes, you're fake. That's right. It's just really jarring. It was kind of funny to have that experience. And I know I've had it in other Volvos as well. So my request to them would be to upgrade that voice because it just interrupts the whole experience.
Well, I'll be curious to see what the experience is like, when they get some of the Polestar 2s in the fleet, and then obviously the next generation of Volvos, starting with the next XC90, which probably, I think by the end of next year should be out. They've completely replaced the infotainment system and the voice assist. It's all based on Android Automotive.
Oh, interesting.
So it has Google Assistant built into it. So it should have the Google Assistant voices.
Okay.
So you actually be able to select different voices, and you can do all the stuff that you do with Google Assistant on an Android phone, all embedded in the car.
Right. Oh, well, that's interesting. So my Android Auto worked quite well, but I could never expand the screen, that has that huge 9-inch screen. But when I would activate Waze, it would only stay in the lower.
It only uses the lower half,
right?
Yeah.
And you can't change that.
Wait.
No.
The lower half? Wouldn't you think the upper half would be better for Waze?
Right?
Because it's closer to you're not looking down at the.
I think we've had this discussion about the census interface once or twice before.
Yeah, I'm for a company with that safety sort of mantle. It just still astounds me.
Yes.
Well,
yeah. Yeah, but overall, as I said, I very much enjoyed it. I think it's a great family car. There's plenty of room. This one was a 7-seater. It comes in 6 or 7 seats. And those seats, were easy to put down, easy to put back up, a lot of flexibility internally. The cabin is a really nice, plenty of room. Again, this is my other brother, Larry, who is also very tall and, just takes up a lot of room. He's a big guy and super comfortable, just plenty of room in it for he's 6'3", and so really long legs, and just was he himself commented a couple times on how comfortable it was. So the one that I had, this is the T6, which only comes in all-wheel drive, and it was the R design also. So it had some of the appearance packages, and then it also has 20-inch wheels on it. So this one started at $57,295. That includes the $995 for destination, and the one that I had was $75,235. So it definitely had a lot of accoutrements on it, and all the kind of bells and whistles.
I'm curious. Was it last week or the week before? I think that you had the XT6.
Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Do you remember what the price was on the XT6?
I can look it up easily. I think it was.
Well, I'm curious, which would you rather have? Because I know you can price an XT6, into the same kind of price range. Which do you prefer, the XT6 or the Volvo?
It's a good question. I think, because they're both really, they're both quality products, really. I would probably say I'm going to go with the XT6 because I think, except for the volume control, ergonomically it was a little friendlier for me. It was a little bit easier for me to get comfortable with it. Now, again, as we often talk about, we're in a different vehicle every week, but I drove both of them. I drove both vehicles quite a bit, and I felt like I got used to the XT6 faster. So
yeah, the Cadillac's definitely more traditional in its control layout.
Right. So the Cadillac that I had, it was 63, but then there's the top of the line, which goes for more like 73.
Yeah.
And that Cadillac had the V6 engine in it, which was really, really nice.
Yeah. See, that's interesting. I never really, so first of all, I think the XT6 rides and handles better than the XC90. The XC90 is lovely to look at. It's a nice place to sit in, but its ride still seems a little stiff to me, especially depending on the wheels you get on it. Some of the larger wheels are make it worse. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the way that thing goes down the road. I just thought it was like stiff and not supple over. It didn't feel luxurious in that sense. I'm not sure what's going on with the suspension tuning. And it's been a little.
The other thing I really liked on the Cadillac was the rear view. I love the rear view mirror where you can switch it to
the camera
mirror, right?
Yeah.
And then also the backup camera has a bunch of different modes that were really, really useful at times. So I liked that aspect of the Cadillac as well. Sorry, I can't see anything tonight.
When are they updating the XC90? Like, is that it's old now? Too. That's coming really soon,
I think
right?
we'll probably see the new XC90 probably the second half of next year. I think it goes into production in early 22. They've said that it's launching in 2022, so we'll probably see it before the end of next year.
Yeah, I have to just to confirm, I'm going to go with the XT6 on this one. I love the because that's the one that I had after the tropical storm.
Right.
And so I used the Wi-Fi a lot. I was getting my sister from the airport, which is funny because I drove my brother to a different airport in the XC90. But yeah, I think, and it's funny, Dan, I didn't have that same experience from a ride standpoint. I thought that the XC90 was really nice, but and as I said, I was amazed that it was only a 4-cylinder because it does a really, really good job. But I do think that the XT6 was a little bit, they were both very refined, but the XT6 just had that little bit more of a muscle. That's very appealing.
Yeah, we're not doing anything for our comment that we give a lot of love to GM and Ford, but I think a part of the thing is that the XT6 is it's newer, so it has some updated features, and then there's the contrast between how one company does it versus another.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not going to go wrong with either one. You're never going to go wrong buying the Volvo. But I think just having had them fairly close, back to not quite back to back, but fairly close.
Well, and one thing that the that the Volvo offers that Cadillac doesn't, in a premium, SUV of this size, and they're pretty similar in size, is the Volvo, you can get a plug-in hybrid option, which is not available in the Cadillac. The Cadillac, you only have that one powertrain option.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So if you want something that's electrified, and has some all-electric driving capability, the Volvo is your only option there.
Right, and you are going to get. Well, it's interesting because
at least among those two,
the Cadillac the fuel economy is not quite as good. So it's 17 city, 24 highway, 20 combined. And the Volvo is, as I said earlier, 18, 26 21. So you're going to get better fuel economy on the highway if that's the bulk of your driving. But the reality is the people that are buying these cars, the bulk of their driving is not on the highway because they're typically family cars. So they're doing a lot of in-town driving. And, there's only 1 mile per gallon difference with a 4-cylinder versus a V6. So, again, I think that both companies done a really good job with the power plants that they've put in these. But yeah, and the Cadillac it's a 3.6 liter, 310 horsepower. I mean, it's that what Volvo has done with that engine, I think is really, really fascinating.
Yep.
You guys were luxuriating while I spent the week with a Subaru WRX edition .white. I'm not exactly. Have to talk to Dominic or Jessica and figure out exactly how to say it. Series.White. I'm sorry, Series.White. So it's a limited production run. They're making 500 each of the WRX and the WRX STI of these, and it's really sharp looking. So it has a particular shade of white on the exterior called ceramic white. It's the only model that's going to get it. It's got beautiful matte bronze wheels, so it looks really good. You can see the red Brembo calipers through it on the WRX.
Did you feel like a high school stud in it? Because it sounds like that
is never something that I will be able to emotionally conjure up. But I did feel like a punk ass in it.
Nice.
It started up and you just, has this throaty exhaust, and it's a manual. So, everybody knows how good your technique is with it. It's a WRX. It's a little bit brash. This particular one is outfitted nicely. It had nice Recaro seats that were really comfortable. And the interior is it's dressed up. I think this is meant to sort of be at the top of the range, sort of giving it some new stuff to the WRX while they wait to get the next one out onto the market. It's almost like a last hurrah. It has a Bilstein dampers in the chassis, so it rode pretty well. It handles, the WRX is a good handling car, but with the chassis tuning, it's a little stiff, but it's not terrible. It doesn't beat the hell out of you. So it's a fun car. It has just the 268 horsepower turbo with the 6-speed manual. It's a good time. The problem is I couldn't tell where the hell the clutch take-up was. So I couldn't drive it that smoothly. I spent considerable time trying to figure out how to drive it smoothly. The only time I could get it to sort of be smooth was just by beating the hell out of it.
Was it really early or really late?
It was vague. There was no.
That's annoying.
Yeah, no real indication of oh, here it is. So you drive like a beginner. You trying to be smooth with the shifts and either you've gone in too low or you rev up too much before the clutch is fully disengaged. So it was a little weird. And the engine is really tuned to be sort of pushy. You get a lot of torque out of it pretty quickly. So it spools up quick, which is fine, but sometimes you get a little bit more than you want. And so some of that plays into it too. You just kind of want to drive easy and it's ready to go all the time.
Right.
But that's part of the charm to a certain degree. And it's, the flip side of that too is sometimes I almost felt like, all right, 268 horsepower, but up an on-ramp onto 95, outside of Boston. There were some times where we'd be like, oh, that's it. I got to shift so I can get back down into the
boost. Was it a 6-speed?
Yeah, 6-speed. Okay. So, it's good. It's good for heel toe. You could have a good time in this car. It's an excellent trainer in terms of performance car trainers. Just like the 86 is as well. This has a little bit more power than that car. It's a little loud on the highway because it's a WRX.
Subaru.
Yeah. The infotainment it hasn't been updated as it doesn't have the legacy system. It has the one step before that. It's not terrible, but it's still all touchscreen, so it takes a little bit to sort of find your way around it. I didn't Didn't absolutely hate it, but not the biggest fan.
That's a ringing endorsement.
Well,
I didn't absolutely hate
e-
it.
everybody's going to these new touchscreen systems for a lot of reasons, and the system in the latest Subarus, like the Legacy and the Outback, it's all touchscreen, and the interface is ugly. The stuff times out. You can't it's we have the problem too, because we're jumping in and out of cars so much that like we're really sort of fine-tuned to, is this easy to use quickly?
Absolutely.
If you're an owner, it's a little different because you're going to spend time with it and you'll figure it out eventually. But I
but
think
it's still frustrating though. I still feel like they need to, that intuitiveness has got to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important, because in a high pressure situation, in a high stress situation, you want it to be intuitive, because all of like your sort of mental instruction manual goes out the window and you're like on your lizard brain. Just, like the thing just has to be there for it. And
also it's your sort of that first impression with your brand new car.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get a brand new computer or a phone, like you want it to be that you want it to be a positive experience. You don't want to be digging around for stuff and trying to figure it out and getting frustrated.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're like me and technology loves you, it won't be a problem.
Right, exactly. I wish the world was as seamless for me as it is for you. But the WRX is a good car. It's a car with a lot of personality, and we need more cars like this. So, it has a couple of cohorts. One of them is the GTI, and the GTI has a little edge in the refinement side of things, where it is quieter on the highway. It's a little softer, and it feels a little bit more premium. But the WRX is a damn good time, and this one looks really good, and it's not that expensive. This Series.White is I think it starts at like $33,995, and then they charge you $900 for a destination. So it's a $35,000 car.
That's cheap by modern standards.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was a good way to extend it and keep it fresh for another year or so.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has the chops. Like it's got 4-piston Brembos. It's got Bilstein suspension. Like all the upgrades that you would make if you were, wanted to upgrade a WRX have been done, and they've been done at the factory level. So it's tuned really well, and it's really fun to drive on a back road. It's again, I think the loudness on the highway gets to me, but it doesn't really feel. It's not tiring, It's a good compromise all around, and it's the type of car that is going to be a little loud anyway. But it's not like exhaust loud. It's like road noise loud. So that's sort of like the one thing that I wish it had better sound insulation. But everything's a trade off.
Yeah, I think it's tiring after a while, frankly.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't want to drive it down to Greenwich for pizza. My ears would be ringing.
Yeah.
And
or otherwise.
Yeah. The STI version of it gets even more powerful. So that has the 310 horsepower, 2.5 liter, and you get a little bit more performance stuff. You get the center differential, the DCCD, the driver control center differential, and torque vectoring all-wheel drive. They put this one had, I forget the tires that were on it, but the STI gets Michelin Pilot Sport Cups. So that one actually seems like it would be even a little bit more serious, and it would probably feel more serious, and maybe too much for some people. So the WRX is a nice compromise set up this way, where it has more performance, it has more sort of it's tuned a little bit more aggressively, but it's not all in like the STI that is just. The STI could be a lot to take.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since I drove an STI, but the last time, the STI has always had more peak power than the WRX, but it came at the cost of that low end responsiveness.
Which I might actually like that.
Yeah, I mean,
depending
on what you're looking for, it certainly can be a little more exciting, because you're sitting, you get on the accelerator and you sit there and wait, and then boom, pushes you in the back, with that, as that boost comes on. Yeah. I don't know. I doubt it's quite as extreme now as it used to be, but that was definitely the difference between the WRX. I always liked the WRX. I felt it was a little more drivable, as a daily driver than the STI was.
Yeah, I'll agree there. It's tuned that way.
Yeah.
It has the low end torque versus the making you wait for it. So it kind of depends about what you want. And the hardware on the STI is more serious. You get 6 piston calipers, and it's going to be a little bit more of a weekend track day car, which is cool. Like, I'm glad that they offer that too. So criticisms aside, thank you for making these cars still. Like, seriously, I was so pleased to have a weekend a manual transmission car that's got a little bit of a performance edge to it.
Is it a 5-seater?
You can get 5 in it.
It's got 5 seat belts.
Yeah. The people in the back seat should be real familiar with each other. At least if they aren't when they start, they will be when you're done. It's a good all-arounder, and I think it looks fantastic. I love the way it looks, the white with the bronze colored wheels and stuff. It's going to be really distinctive, and there's only 500 of them. So
that's amazing.
This is a good limited edition car. So the WRX continues to be a pretty decent performance bargain. And because if it's just the most special one that you're going to get into a quote unquote regular one for less money. So I still like the WRX. Every now and then I get a refresh about why. If you live where the roads twist and there's elevation changes, it's a good time.
Cool.
There's a freaking thing. It's happening. It's gonna happen in just 2.5 hours. The embargo lifts from when we're recording it now. So it's September 2nd today.
No, actually, the embargo doesn't lift till 9 a.m.
Oh, son of a bitch. So 12 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Either way, in 12 hours, we can talk about it officially, and I'm not going to turn the podcast around that fast. So there is the long-awaited. I mean, the Jeep Wrangler 4xe is it's important and impressive. We'll get to it, but the long-awaited Grand Wagoneer concept, which is actually the production car, was shown. Sam, you got to watch the backgrounder and get the full dog and pony show. And this is
to the extent there was a dog and pony show, but yeah. This has been a very long drip campaign for this, and I think we're all kind of on the edge of our seats for it. So what can you tell us about it? Yeah, so the Jeep is bringing back the Wagoneer. They've decided to expand upmarket and compete in a segment where they haven't been before, which is full-size premium SUVs. They're going to have Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. So presumably the Wagoneer is going to be priced more, mainstream pricing, although they haven't given us any indication of pricing yet. These vehicles go on sale next summer. So a little less than a year from now. They go in production late spring in Detroit here at the Warren Truck Plant. Jeep gave us very little in the way of actual technical details on these things. They officially are describing this as a design study, the Grand Wagoneer concept. But I mean, let's face it, this close to production, this is essentially what it's going to look like. Some details, may change, in terms of some of the trim. You probably won't have the little teak inserts in the tie down loops and the roof rails and underneath the cradling the headlights, but this big 3-row SUV is what we're going to see next year. What's not clear yet is if there will be 2 wheelbases like there are with most of the competitors, like the Expedition, Navigator, the GMC Yukon, the Cadillac Escalade. I would guess there probably will be, but it's a big 3-row. It's quite a different design from the Grand Cherokee. It's more upright, blockier. I don't know quite how to describe it. One of the things,
it's very square.
It's very, very square. Yeah. And it's interesting that the pillars, the A, B, and C pillars are actually quite prominent, because what they've done, if you look at the current Grand Cherokee, the B and C pillars are, they're kind of blacked out, so you've got a chrome strip that typically surrounds the entire side glass on the Grand Cherokee. And so it almost with tinted windows, it almost looks like one big piece of glass that spans the entire side. Whereas, this one, the pillars, I don't think are really any wider, but, they're painted in the same white, and it just extends straight up from the body sides right up to the roof rail. And then you've got a black roof on there. So it's quite prominent, and it's quite a different look.
So that's actually, I'm curious because, Rebecca, you and I tend to put a lot of weight on the way things are styled and designed. So what's your first impression of this? I mean, it's a different look. It's different maybe than people are expecting.
It is a different look. Frankly, my first thought was that it looks like Lincoln. I mean, it didn't strike me as looking, it certainly doesn't hearken in any way, shape, or form back to the Grand Wagoneer of our youth, or I don't know exactly when the last time it came out.
It was built for long enough. I think 91. It was all of our youth.
Yeah,
right. So I think all of us and different decades had a chance.
It was built from like 63 to 62 to 1991.
Yeah. So this is, this is not a retro Grand Wagoneer.
The one sort of like retro touch I can see is the grill, the shape of the grill. But other than that, I think, absolutely, I agree.
Even it's though, I mean, because look at how narrow the headlamps are super narrow, and in the back they're super narrow as well. So, I feel like, I mean, it's almost. First, I think it's cool in that it is, certainly from the front, it looks very Jeep-like. Less so from the back to me. I love the gigantic rims. I mean, those tires look like they're 24-inch.
I think they're 24s on the concept.
Are they 24s?
Yeah.
Oh, concept's always and that'll be the upgrade.
So there's kind of this, sort of very the imported from Detroit kind of tagline that they did on Dodge. I get that feeling from this vehicle, which is kind of fun. The interior looks absolutely beautiful, but the back of it sort of really kind of threw me at first because, again, it looks much more Lincoln to me. And that's a compliment. It's meant as a positive. It looks very refined. It looks luxurious. It does not echo in any way the Wagoneer, the original Grand Wagoneer. Did they refer to that at all, Sam, in the backgrounder?
They did.
I mean, were they even trying?
Yeah, they did. They talked about, the old Wagoneers, and I think this is like the pillars, for example, are one area where they kind of referenced it. But really, I mean, if you look back at, the old Wagoneers, there's not much here that harkens back to that.
Well, because I always love when they're like, but no, it's reflected in some obscure, and you're like, no, it's not.
I think that's
but one thing that Ralph Gilles did highlight, in doing the design walk around, was those pillars, and contrasted it to, competitors like the Navigator and the Escalade, which kind of try to hide those pillars now, and also Range Rover, same thing. They all try to hide those pillars, and, they're very prominent on this vehicle.
I pulled up some old pictures from the 70s. I think that the biggest difference really is the headlamps. They were all very round or square, and these headlamps are sleek and slick and very narrow, which is the style of today. But there is, the Grand Wagoneer was a very, very square, upright vehicle, and they certainly have recreated that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only part that kind of calls back to the old Wagoneers is that upright blockiness.
Well, the grill with the kink in it sort of goes back to the early ones, like the 63s when they were Kaisers. They sort of had that grill with the kink in it. And then when it by the end, they had redone the front end, and there was a new grille that sort of was pasted over the old grille.
Right. Well, and the thing is, the Wagoneer never really had, the classic Jeep 7-slot grille.
Right. No, you're right, Sam. It didn't.
And when it wasn't, again, it didn't start as a Jeep, and it's a Brooke Stevens design, so it's got that sort of classical mid-century modern timelessness. There wasn't a whole lot of pillar to begin with on the original, so I like that they've actually gone. They've gone pretty prominent with it on this car, because you can also keep it looking, that surface, with it, it's painted. So it's not black plastic that's going to pick up scratches and stuff. It's going to have that look, that high quality surface every time you get in for, many years to come. And it looks different. The pictures that we can see too, it's interesting the details you can pick out. Like you can look under the back of the rear shot, and you can see the IRS hanging down. So I think that they've staked out some new ground for Jeep, and that's great. There's only so many places you can take those Wrangler cues, or the Grand Cherokee is getting, it's old now, so
it's getting replaced next year too. So who knows what that one's going to look like.
So yeah, I wonder. I'm assuming that the fronts will be pretty similar from the Grand Wagoneer to the Grand Cherokee. You can expect that style to sort of carry through the family to a degree. It's imposing, which I think it's probably supposed to be, because this is basically it's a Ram 1500 SUV, right? Like that's
yeah. I mean, as I said, according to Jeep representatives, this is a design study, and so we're not ready to talk about technical details for the most part. But
sure, whatever.
But we assume that since this is being built at the Warren Truck Plant alongside the Ram Classic, that this is going to be a body on frame, and a derivative of the modern, the new Ram 1500 platform, but with an IRS, an independent rear suspension on the back.
So the Grand Cherokee though is a unibody, isn't it?
The Grand Cherokee is a unibody.
Okay.
And this is going to be built in a different plant from that. So,
okay.
The one thing they did say, as far as technical details, and they've actually said this for a while, is that there will be plug-in hybrid versions of this. Right. And the concept is a plug-in hybrid, but they didn't give any specific details on that. But there will be available with a plug-in hybrid powertrain, and presumably a Hemi, and possibly even there's been some rumors about a new inline 6 gas engine to replace the Pentastar, so that might show up in here as well. This would be a good place to launch that.
This would be a good place for the 3-liter diesel, although their diesel is loud, so that might not be the right.
The interior is beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's move inside.
So inside, this thing, at least the concept version has lots and lots of screens. Lots of screens, like eight screens. There's 5 in the front.
Where's okay.
Oh, yes, because they've used the passenger side has its own.
Yeah.
Are those 2 individual?
Sorry, four. Sorry, 7 screens. Four screens. Yes. So there's 2. You've got the 12.5-inch instrument cluster display.
Yep.
And then 2 displays in the center stack at the 10-inch and a 12-inch. The lower one, the 10-inch, is for some of the comfort controls like seats and other stuff, and the infotainment and nav is in the upper screen. And then there's actually physical climate control buttons in between. So
thank you.
Yeah, don't have the problem you have on the Ram with its 12-inch portrait display. And then there's a separate 10.5-inch display on the passenger side of the dash, just for the passenger. And apparently this has one of those privacy filters on there, so that from the driver's seat you can't really see it. So you're avoiding driver distraction, because the passenger will be able to watch videos and stuff on that screen.
Okay, so that's
and also screens. Do things like put in nav inputs and then swipe them over to the center screen.
That's awesome, actually, because that's
really cool.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is the first application of a passenger side screen in an SUV. The Porsche Taycan already offers this, but this is the first time in an SUV. And then in the second row, there's 3 more screens. There's two 12-inch, I think, or 10-inch displays for rear seat entertainment, on the backs of the front seats, and then another 10-inch display on the center console for comfort controls for the second row passengers.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it for the controls because it's cheaper. It still makes me sad.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. Like FCA has been pretty on the money with, they'll make mistakes and then they'll pull it back. You know, like the RAM system was a little too much, but they're figuring it out, and they're backing us out to the right mix of physical controls and user customization and stuff. So I have hope that it will be pretty easy to use. The seat controls being on a screen sort of bugs me. Yeah, I'm not a fan because you got to stab at the screen and there's latency there, and then there's latency anyway because it's all networked. So it's not like you're just tweaking a switch on the seat like the old days and getting instant response. So we'll see how that works in practice.
Well, I wonder if there's redundancy in that they have the seat controls on the side as well.
I would expect that you'll have, like the primary seat controls on the side, for fore aft, recline, lumbar support. And then, as you get into some of the details, like moving the side bolsters and massage and things like that, those are probably in the touchscreen.
And you can probably program all of that. So, with memory settings. So hopefully it's kind of just a set it and forget it.
Right.
Sort of
And that's
idea.
like, that was my thought, was like, you'll adjust that in the driveway.
Yeah.
Once
or twice. Yeah. And then it'll be there for when you need it again.
I do like when they have this kind of setup, though. I do like when they have more and more cars are coming out with automatic heated and cooled seats that sense the temperature outside.
And this is something FCA's had for a while.
Which is really cool. I love that.
When it's below 40 degrees, it automatically turns on the seat. Or you can turn that off in the screen, but by default, it turns on the seat heaters when it's below 40 degrees and the steering wheel heater.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, steering
It's very
wheel
cozy.
heaters. I like steering wheel heaters.
Dan, you look like you need some self-care.
I do. It's been, it's been a weird 6 months. We've been waiting for this for a long time. And every time I drive a Ram 1500, it's usually an extended cab version. So it's 2/3 of this anyway. And I go, this would make a really good SUV. So I think it's a good basis for the Grand Wagoneer. I want to see what the Wagoneer versus Grand Wagoneer kind of split is, because they're saying, right, that this is basically going to be a couple of models. It's going to be the Wagoneer portfolio,
right? So there's going to be a Wagoneer and a Grand Wagoneer, which is probably like a GMC Yukon and a Yukon Denali.
Okay, so neither one of them is going to be. Well, I mean,
Yukon XL.
There are kind of no bad Jeeps.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I think the Grand Wagoneer is probably going to stretch up a little bit higher even than the Denali does. So it's more like, probably going to be like the difference between a Tahoe and an Escalade, or an Expedition and a Navigator.
All right.
Look, if they can sell $75,000 Wranglers, they can sell $100,000 Grand Wagoneers.
Right, and I have little doubt that a Grand Wagoneer plug-in hybrid, with all the trimmings, is easily going to be a 6-figure vehicle.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think the market is there for that, and I think also that for the family that has the tricked out Rubicon or Gladiator or whatever, the other side of the garage bay is, could be one of these.
The question is, will they do a Grand Wagoneer Trackhawk?
Of course they will.
They won't call it the Trackhawk. They'll call it like the Hamptons Eagle. All right, so let's talk about the electrified Jeep a little bit.
Okay.
So I kind of I made that one less important because it's less important to me, but it's still cool.
Yeah. So the other thing that the Jeep is revealing tomorrow morning as we record is the Wrangler 4xe, and they back in late 2017 when they launched the JL Wrangler. At the time they said, they launched the Wrangler with, the Pentastar V6 and a 2-liter turbo with 48 volt mild hybrid system. And they said at the time that there would be a plug-in hybrid version coming in 2020. And then they had this plug-in hybrid on display at CES this year at their booth, but they gave no details about it. The only thing you could see was the fact that, there was a plug port on the driver's side front fender. Now we finally have the details on it. It's going into production in December. And it's using, it keeps the 2-liter turbo 48 volt mild hybrid, and it adds in the ZF 8-speed plug-in hybrid transmission, which replaces the torque converter with an electric motor. I think it's about a 90 horsepower electric motor, or 95 horsepower electric motor, something like that. And all told, this thing is going to produce 375 horsepower, 460 foot-pounds of torque. So a little shy of a Hemi V8 in horsepower, but more torque than a Hemi V8. And because it's an big electric motor in there, it's going to be instant torque. So this is going to be very interesting to drive off-road. It's going to be available in base, Sahara, and Rubicon versions. So then you get the full-on off-road version of this. There's a 17.1 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery that's underneath the rear seat. The plug-in hybrid is only available on the 4-door, which these days that's what most Wranglers are, is 4 doors. They sell far more than the 2 doors. So there's a sealed liquid-cooled battery underneath the rear seat. It'll give about 25 miles of all-electric range. They're estimating the overall fuel economy at about 50 mpge, which, for a vehicle of this type, this is a 5,000-pound SUV that, doesn't have, great aerodynamics, to say the least. If you can get 25 miles of electric range and 50 mpge on it, I think you're doing pretty damn good. There's, in addition to the usual Wrangler drive modes, the off-road modes and things like that, you've got 2-speed transfer case, four-wheel drive high, 4-wheel drive low. And, it's the same axles, the same Dana 44 axles is what you get on any other Wrangler, the same transfer case, same crawl ratios. The only difference is, you've got all this extra power and torque now, and the ability to go electric, when you're going down, going through the trails. So this is going to be very interesting. No indication yet of the pricing. I have little doubt that it's not going to be inexpensive. But it's going to be very interesting to see consumer acceptance of this thing.
So will you be able to put it in let's say you're going to go out on some trails, and can you go back and forth between modes? So you drive out there, save all your electric for off-road? Yep.
So there's a mode where you can tell it to run primarily on the engine and save the electric. And in fact, there's one of the modes you can do is tell it to charge up the battery while you're driving, so that when you arrive at your destination, the battery will be fully charged. So
okay,
it'll use more gas that way, but
right.
You can have the battery fully charged. So when you hit the trail, you can switch over to pure electric mode and just drive purely on electric.
Which is kind of cool.
Off-road, yeah, and 25 miles of range, on the EPA test. Most of the time when you're going off road, you're going pretty slow. You're probably, I think most of the time, not going that much farther than 25 miles, I think, because you're not going very fast typically. So, you could probably do most of your off-roading in pure electric drive with this thing.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me when I was reading through the press release was the 30 inches of water fording.
Yeah.
In this, even with the battery underneath there.
Yeah. So all the off-road specs are exactly the same as any other Wrangler, same approach and departure angles, because the battery is up, it's up above the drive shaft, it's underneath the rear seat. The rear seat has been redesigned, so it's flips and folds forward, so you can access it for service. But the battery's under the rear seat, and it's completely sealed. So yeah, you retain the same water fording capability as you get in any other Wrangler.
I do wonder if the ingress and egress is higher, if the ride height is higher.
The ride height is the same,
but the ground clearance is higher.
No, it's all the same.
It's all the same.
Yep.
Interesting. Where'd they put the battery?
Under the rear seat.
I know, but I'm just trying
So it's above the frame.
Right. I'm looking at the diagram now. I see it.
Yeah.
It just, it's kind of cool how it looks fairly bulky actually though. Am I being too literal? It's late at night. I don't do well late at night.
It's hard to tell until we actually see it, but I think it's, I don't think, they say the passenger and cargo volume is the same, so it hasn't changed any of that, or, it's like within, a couple inches,
right.
So there's no notable changes there. And they've managed to pack it all in there somehow.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Clever engineers. And I think honestly, like for me, 4-cylinder Wranglers are the best Wranglers. I think they're the best. The extra torque of the electric motor's going to help. They sure are making a lot of different powertrains available in the Wrangler and the Gladiator and all the different permutations of it.
My guess is that over the next couple of years, we're probably going to see some simplification. Like I would guess the diesel's probably not going to stick around much more than a couple more years.
Yeah, even in Europe.
I bet the Pentastar is going to go at some point too.
Yeah, and I think the Pentastar will likely get replaced by this rumored inline six that they've developed. I think that Europe is probably going to be the biggest, end up being the biggest market for this plug-in hybrid Wrangler. Europe
and what about China though too?
China as well. For China, I don't know about the Wrangler. They'll offer this one in China, but they're also developing some battery electric Jeeps for the Chinese market.
Okay, and then they've got the Renegade and Compass in Europe.
Yeah, those are already on sale, plug-in hybrid versions of the Renegade and Compass.
Okay, we're not getting the 4xe though. This is what it reads. It says Jeep Renegade 4xe and Compass 4xe models arrive in Europe this summer.
Right.
They don't indicate that we're getting them.
Yeah, the hints I've gotten from Jeep spokespeople is that probably the Compass will come to the U.S. market at some point, probably later in 2021.
Okay.
Maybe they're not sure about the Renegade yet, but the Compass probably will.
Okay.
Because it's in that same segment, with vehicles like the RAV4 and the Escape, which also have hybrids and plug-in hybrids.
Right.
So they may want to bring that one over here to compete with those.
So it's the hybrid Jeep brand is 4xe across all the models.
4xe.
Eventually. 4xe, not 4xe.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, 4x8, sorry.
If you say so. So there's a new S-Class in town, and everybody today has been saying that it is underwhelming, which I completely disagree with. I think it's
underwhelming in what respect? And just from a design standpoint?
Yeah, it's conservative, it's an S-Class.
It's supposed to be.
Like, it looks like an overinflated C-Class. That's not bad.
Yeah.
It's all fine. All fine. I think it's lovely, quite honestly. And I love the statement from their styling chief saying, our grill is stately, or whatever he said. He was like, we don't need to overdo it. Which I thought was great in this age of like giant
little dig.
Giant grills. So the S-Class is one of those sort of segment defining vehicles, and I think that they have done it again.
It does look quite different than other products on the market. As you say, that's not a bad thing, but you're right. The grille is smaller and the headlamps are a little bit larger.
Yeah.
I should know what this is called. The area below the grill, which doesn't even exist
lower
in
grill?
some cars
The
anymore.
lower grill.
I mean, that's literally what it
that
is.
grill that's low.
The lower grill.
The lower grill.
Yeah.
That is the if you want to get technical, that is the high pressure area.
Okay.
That's actually where most of the air comes in from. Most of that, the main
I was
part of
going
the
to call
grill.
it the air intake area.
That is actually the primary air intake. Most of what's above the classic, what people think of as the grill, is actually blanked off, so there's no airflow through it.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. So, importantly, though, it looks like a Mercedes.
Yeah, you will not mistake this for anything but a Mercedes-Benz, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not as radical as some of the concepts we've seen, like the EQS concept and, things like that. And I think as they introduce those electric models, those will have more radical designs than this one.
So
It's gorgeous, though.
I think it's lovely.
it's really
the interior is lovely.
Yeah, this is the one for plutocrats and dictators.
Did either of you have a chance to read the 30-something thousand words?
Ordinarily, absolutely, but not today.
I was on cellular data. I couldn't afford the gigabyte download of it. Yeah. It's that typical sort of S-Class thing, though. They overdo it.
Yeah. I mean, Mercedes and BMW in particular have a long history of overwrought press releases, but there are actually a few interesting technical tidbits about this thing. There's a plug-in hybrid version that's coming, although it's not clear yet if it's going to be offered in the US. I would imagine it will be at some point, but it's coming to the European market next year. That's supposed to have 100 kilometers, 60 miles of electric driving range. The two engines that we're getting here in North America initially are the 3-liter inline six and the twin turbo 4-liter V8, both with 48-volt mild hybrid systems on them. The screens inside, lots of big screens, especially a particularly large center screen. One of the interesting things they've done is they actually have a face recognition system in here now, so that when you get in the car, it recognizes you and it brings up your preferences automatically.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. The new version.
All I can think is those spies that get, their faces reorganized.
The latex face kind of thing. Yeah. I don't want the car storing my face, my phrenology profile. No, thank you.
The new version of the MBUX infotainment system is powered by 3 NVIDIA processors now. Apparently speaks 27 different languages.
Of course
3
it does.
NVIDIA processors. Like, that's a gaming rig. That's a lot of...
that's what you need to do natural language processing, which it apparently is pretty good at. We'll see.
And it does natural language processing on board. So it's not like connecting to the cloud.
It also connects to the cloud, but it does it on board as well for when you don't have a cloud connection. So
that actually, in practice, that should actually be better. Because what I've noticed is that the cars that sort of connect up to the cloud for it, they're not as good if you're in a dead spot. That's why they also have they're hybrid systems. That they'll use the cloud if the connection's available. If it's not, then they do it all on board. And this should give it plenty of processing to do good stuff on board as well. That's good. And then a couple of other interesting tidbits. At least for Europe, the U.S. press release makes no mention of this, so it's presumably not going to be offered here, is something they're calling Drive Pilot, which is a level 3 conditionally automated system. Which is that to compete with the Audi A8? Yes, except the A8 system never actually was launched. They never released it. Because the regulations didn't allow it and there was too much uncertainty about the regulations. There are now, back in June of this year, they passed new regulations, new UNEC harmonized regulations for level 3 systems. And so this cover UNECE automotive regs cover 60 countries, including all of Europe and most Asian countries. And so the new rules allow these level 3 systems. So level 3 means that not only is it hands off like GM Super Cruise, but it's also eyes off. You don't have to be watching the road. You don't have to be constantly supervising the system, but you do have to stay
behind the steering wheel, so you can't, go back and take a nap. You can't, can't crawl in the back seat. But, and it gives you, when it is reaching the end of its range where it can operate, you have 10 seconds to take over control.
Or it'll self-destruct.
Yeah. So the rule, well, no, it'll bring the car to a stop. And
no, I know. I'm just.
But it's these systems, for this regulation, they've got to have a driver monitor system, which they have on here. It's limited to 60 kilometers an hour, about 40 miles or 37 miles an hour. It has to be geofenced, so it's only on highways. So basically, it's designed for when you're in stop and go traffic on the highway up to 37 miles an hour. It basically, you can just hand off control to the system, and you don't have to be constantly paying attention. It'll drive you more or less automatically in those conditions.
I think what's most impressive to me about it is, the S-Class has always had a certain level of subtlety that hides the advancement that's in it, and so you start to dig into the details. Like even we've talked about, it has the three onboard NVIDIA processors. It's got lots of capabilities with its systems. It's also got a coefficient of drag that's like 0.22, which is crazy low. So they've done a lot of aerodynamic work on it for a big car. And do they talk at all about the digital? I'm assuming you watched a sort of press introduction, but maybe not.
I did not. I had another call at the same time. So
what are the digital lights that they're talking about with the?
So this is something that we're seeing from a number of. Again, this is something I don't think will be available in the U.S. market because current regulations don't allow it. But
are those the ones that work like a DLP projector?
Basically, Audi's got them in Europe, and other manufacturers are bringing them out. So in fact, that's exactly what it is. It's a DLP system, so little micro mirrors, and LEDs, and basically it can define a pattern. One of the things, I haven't delved into all the details on this one yet, but for example, on the Audi system, it uses the forward-facing camera to detect, if there's a car coming towards you, it will automatically dim the lights right where that vehicle is, or if there's a pedestrian, dim the lights right on that area. So basically, you can have your high beams on everywhere except where that car is, so you don't blind the oncoming car. And it can also do things like light up, or give more intense light on the specific lane where you're supposed to be, or brighter lighting on the track where your wheels are heading, so you can see things like patches of ice or potholes, and see you'll be able to see if your wheels are going to hit a pothole and help steer around it. All kinds of crazy things like that aren't currently legal in the U.S. market.
So they really like smart lights.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
We don't get the good stuff.
No.
I know, right?
It's not legally, and I think too, everybody complaining that they didn't break a whole lot of ground. It's the end of their press release says the loyalty rate for the S-Class is especially high. So in the U.S., more than 70% of S-Class customers eventually go on to choose another vehicle from Mercedes-Benz. So they know their buyer for this car.
Yeah.
This car is what their buyers want to buy. So, I just send us them so we can try them out. I mean, I would love to just roll like a Kaiser in one of these things for a week.
Not the cheap Kaiser version.
Yes. Either way. Yeah. Either way. It's fine. New S-Class, again, it sort of like sets the bar for the sort of aircraft carrier size.
Yeah. I mean,
luxury sedan.
The S-Class has always been, the car where Mercedes introduces new technology. So things like in this case, the level 3 automated driving, there's also an automated valet park assist system that's coming. They haven't said exactly when that's going to launch yet, but it's coming. In the past, back in '78, the S-Class was where where Mercedes launched the first ABS system. The first electronic ABS system. It got the first stability control. It got the first traction control. There's all kinds of things that have been first on the S-Class.
I mean, even
Yeah.
the keys are gorgeous.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's
no,
crazy.
the attention to detail is exquisite, and
As well, it should be at this price point.
It's $100,000 car, so yeah, at least. So yeah, it absolutely should be. But I still appreciate it though.
Yeah. Oh, this also has an augmented reality heads-up display system. So it's a multi-plane.
Sounds like my dating life. That's not what you mean. I'm sorry.
It's a multi-plane heads-up display. So you have like the nearer plane that gives you things like your speed and turn signals and things like that. But then at a plane that appears to be further away, it actually projects stuff like for your navigation prompts. It'll actually put arrows to really show you here's where you want to turn right here.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So,
that the Mercedes SUV that I had a couple weeks ago, it had a fantastic heads-up display as well.
Yeah. And, they say that it's analogous to watching a 77-inch TV, based on the size of this thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Not sure what distance you're looking at that 77-inch display, but whatever.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lied. It was the BMW that had the amazing heads-up display. The Mercedes GLC 43 that I had did not have heads-up display. As soon as I said it, I was like, I don't think that's right.
See, that seems like an oversight.
Just to clarify for our listeners who we love.
All right. Well, I think there's going to be plenty more to talk about when these things get into the fleet. So now it's your move, BMW or Genesis or
new 7 Series is due
Audi.
next year, I think. So
yeah.
This has certainly set a high bar, though.
Yeah.
I mean, from a design and technology standpoint.
Well, and next week we'll be able to talk about the Lucid Air in more detail.
Yes.
And that one is setting a high bar. But one thing we can say, they announced today, actually, they made it public today, that the Lucid Air runs a quarter mile in 9.9 seconds for a big 4-door sedan.
Wow.
Great.
It's nuts.
Just think of all the pedestrians that
that's
Rich
Dodge
Asshole's
Demon
going to mow down. I want a
Dan.
slow EV. I want a slow EV that costs $15,000.
There's Prius.
Just buy yourself a 4-year-old Nissan Leaf.
Exactly. There you go.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll do that. All right, let's do some questions.
All right.
Before we fall asleep at the wheel.
Andrew Garcia asks, says, hi guys, looking for a daily commuter to replace my 07 Honda CRV. I was hoping my CRV would last me until the release of the new Bronco, but it's pushing 200,000 miles and I'm starting to think it won't make it. I'm on Long Island, New York, so I do have my fair share of Northeast winter that I may have to contend with, so I'm looking for all-wheel drive. I'm not expecting to do much off-roading, maybe an occasional drive on the beach. Looking for something more aggressive looking than the CRV with modern safety features. My wife is really opposed to the looks of the Subaru Forester. I expect to put about 23,000 miles a year on it. All said and done, I'm looking to spend no more than $45,000. Do you have any thoughts for a replacement?
Wow.
What do you guys?
Long Island. Oh, let's see.
Long Island. Oh my God.
Long Island. If it was driving the beach, what beach? Like, is that like Rockaway Beach or?
He doesn't say.
Sorry.
So
Ramon.
So under 45 grand, more aggressive looking than a CRV.
I mean, I went when I was reading this. I went to the Passport and the Blazer.
The Blazer.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. I'm not sure if that's the kind of aggressive he was looking for. Given that he specifically called out he was waiting on the Bronco. I'm not sure if the Blazer is. I mean, it's certainly worth mentioning.
Well, I mean, then a Wrangler, then, right?
Yeah. Wrangler's definitely Wrangler's a possibility. Wrangler Unlimited.
I think that the Wrangler is just, if you're doing 23,000 miles a year in a Wrangler,
that's
Jesus,
that might get tiresome.
That's why I went to the Passport and the Blazer.
I agree. I think the Passport in particular is probably a good one for him to consider. It sounds like he's a Honda kind of person.
So the Passport's a little larger though. So here's the thing. Like, I guess my first,
but it's comparable in size to a Bronco.
Okay.
The Pilot's definitely bigger, but the Passport, I like the Passport a lot.
Yeah, no, the Passport's great.
My first advice would be like, just save your money and just wait until the CRV actually dies.
Well, yeah, assuming it doesn't, assuming it makes it through the winter into next spring, then that's certainly an option.
Then it's Bronco time.
But if it doesn't, then if he needs something sooner, then this is what we're making suggestions for. So certainly the passport's an option.
Passport's an option.
And the Honda Passport, just for clarification, the one that I drove on the launch topped out at 43.6. So it starts at 31.9, which is not one I would recommend. But it's within that price point that it doesn't want to spend over 45, and you can probably get. I think you can probably get a little bit of a deal. And it has 5,000 towing capacity. He didn't mention that he needs to tow it all, but we actually had it. We spent most of the day, right? Yeah. On off road, and it did really, really well. I believe that was the one, Sam, that didn't have the. It's on the fly, but it's a little bit awkward to change the modes. That was my only complaint I remember with that. But the Blazer's another really good option, I think.
Yeah, Blazer's definitely worth a look. Also the Toyota RAV4.
Foresters, I like the RAV4. I especially like the RAV4 hybrid. I was thinking, so there's the Rogue. If you want to stay in the same class, like
but those are not masculine looking.
Right, and that's what I was going to say is like, if you want to stay in that class, and you're looking for something that's sort of like aggressive, like the RAV4 offers a sort of aggressive looking version. But if you wanted to,
because I had the Toyota RAV4 TRD off road. That was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah,
that was the that was sort of the off-roady kind of edition.
That's the one that Ezra Dyer tried to drown and he couldn't. Like. He kept fording a river with it.
Hopefully I had it before him.
Yeah, maybe he had a different one. So it's one of those things like it'll actually do a lot more than you think. That's not bad. The Escape is also within the same class, but again, like it's certainly not.
But it's not, I don't think it's the look he's looking for. But you might want to consider the Bronco Sport, which is definitely in that. Price, in that price range, and it's got I think the look that he's probably interested in. And if what he's interested in is something for some customization, there's going to be a lot of customization options for the Bronco Sport.
Right.
Yeah, if he can make it that long.
Right. Yeah. If you can make it that long.
Well, the Bronco Sport should be out in like November, December.
It's coming out car based.
Yeah.
So that is a very different vehicle than
that's true. But it's more like, Jeep Compass or Cherokee, it's a much more ruggedized version. It's probably, even more so than the Passport, it's designed as an off-road alternative, because what they did with Escape and Bronco Sport is kind of diverged and made the Escape more car-like this time, and because they knew they were doing the Bronco Sport as the more ruggedized off-road version.
Right.
Yeah, and so I was actually going to recommend the Jeep Compass, because I think that's actually distinctive looking, and it drives well, and it's packaged nicely, and they're not super duper expensive. So I like that one a lot. If you wanted to go with something that's even a little tougher, you could consider a Toyota 4Runner.
The 4Runner's awesome.
But that's like, it's a little bit more of a commitment. You gotta drive it and understand what you're sort of getting into there. It's the same as the Wrangler in that sense. It's a little trucky, because that's exactly what it is.
As a sort of completely different kind of alternative, I was thinking of the Land Rover Defender, because I wasn't sure where that started, but that one starts at about 50,000. But there is the Land Rover Discovery Sport, which starts at 38.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow, and it's still got that weird 9-speed transmission in it.
Yeah.
Which the Compass also has.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah, all right.
So there's some options out there.
I mean, if we're gonna spend all your money, like a Land Rover.
Well, I mean, he said $45,000, so you can get an entry level, Land Rover Sport in there, or
you
Discovery
can get yourself
Sport.
a really a good deal on a used LR4, especially the one with like the supercharged V8. So there's plenty of stuff to break.
Yeah.
There you go. Or a Range Rover Sport. There you go.
Yeah. All right.
Now we're into the ridiculous.
Next up, Elliot Johnson asks, love the show. Relatively new listener. Thank you, Elliot, for joining us. Have a theory, maybe I read it somewhere, that every car maker has a model that best represents them from all of their other vehicles, from which all their other vehicles are derived. For Mercedes, it's the S-Class, which we were just talking about. BMW, the 3 Series. For Jeep, it's the Wrangler. That doesn't mean this model is the most profitable or best selling, but if you force the automaker to make only one car, that's the one they would pick. I've always felt that you can't go wrong with that vehicle, and it's a safe pick when choosing between cars of a given class. Example, you can always confidently buy a 3 Series without worrying about how it compares to the A4 or Mercedes C-Class. I was wondering whether you agree or find this line of thinking useful. Who would like to go first?
Dan, why don't you go first?
Okay. I think that it's not a bad way to look at it. There's definitely a personality that automakers try to put into their cars, especially premium automakers. Like I did find that, when I bought a lot of Volvos back to back, Volvos drive like Volvos across generations. And it's very similar for, the 3 Series and the C-Class and stuff. Like they drive like they're a part of that family. And part of it is like just the way they do things, where the controls are, how they're marked, what they're, how they operate, that kind of thing it tends to be pretty consistent. So that gives you a consistent experience. And yeah, like they're all going to be, they're sort of their own thing. If you're not comparing, they're going to do what they do and do what you expect them to do. And when you start to compare, you can see which has, strengths or weaknesses among the classes. I will say it gets a little mushy when you get down to the sort of more, I guess, mainstream vehicles. You can tell like an Accord from a Camry, but I have a little bit harder time sort of separating all of the like, just blue chip cars from each other, other than like, yeah, it goes down the road and the controls work. Other than that, they don't all have a lot of personality. So it tends to be more of like a premium car thing, but I think it's a good way to look at it.
Rebecca, your thoughts?
I think so too. I think it's an interesting theory to think about, Elliot, and I'm glad that he brought it up because it gets back to like one of my business philosophies is why. It's a Simon Sinek book, Start with Why. It's like, why do you do what you do? And I think that it can be embodied in specific vehicles. And to Dan's point, it does tend to be more of a luxury brand, but at the same time, I think if you pressed Honda, they would say the Accord is their iconic vehicle on some level, or maybe the Civic. Sorry?
Well, I was just going to say Accord or Civic.
Right, Accord or Civic. And it's kind of like that embodies why they do what they do to make this, reliable. Well, actually, I don't know why they do what they do. That's one of the issues that, legacy manufacturers have that Tesla, for instance, doesn't have because their reason for it being is a little bit more clear and hasn't gotten muddled over the years. But I think it's a really cool way of looking at it. I think it's a great way to investigate a brand, to understand a brand's philosophy, and to Dan's point, you're going to understand how that vehicle drives, especially if they've done a good job of being consistent. If the car and truck people talk to each other, if the interior and exterior people talk to each other, if they're not designing these products in isolation, I think that goes to corporate culture also. So
that was like the classic GM problem where like nobody talked to each other.
Right? Nobody was talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that you can see it reflected you can see corporate culture reflected in the cars that they produce. And so I think it's a really cool way of looking at it. I like it.
Yeah, I agree. And it doesn't apply to every brand. I think there are some brands that don't really have an icon like that but a lot of brands do have these kind of iconic models, and to the, the comment in here, if you force the automaker to make only one car, that's the one they would pick. The ultimate example of that is Ford. They now make only one car, and it's the Mustang.
Right.
The Mustang is the car that represents Ford. I think, if you went to Chevrolet,
I thought that was the F-150.
the F-150 is the one that makes all the money.
Yeah.
But, if you talk to Bill Ford, or you talk to, anybody at Ford, in product development or marketing, say, what is the one product that really represents the heart of Ford? It's the Mustang. That's the one. And, that's why it's still in production and will be for some time. It's not going anywhere. Even though they got rid of, a lot of other cars that sell in much higher volumes, the Mustang is the one. At Chevrolet, I would say it's the Corvette. That is the beating heart of Chevrolet. But there's some, Honda, you could say the Civic or Accord. Toyota, I don't know if they do have one that, that really fits, maybe the Corolla or the Camry, which kind of tells you a bit about, although, today, it might be the Supra, even though that's not really a Toyota.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
so
I know it's not enough of a Toyota.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and, I mean, you look at Nissan, what's the car that, is the heart of Nissan? The GTR maybe? Or
It used to be the Z.
Yeah, it was the Z for a long time. Today it's
yeah, but like the same Z. For a
Yeah.
long time.
For 15 years.
I mean, these kinds of cars often are long running, with, minimal or very evolutionary change.
The
the 911, is a great example.
Oh, but the 911 has had a lot of change.
It's had a lot of change, but you can still see that same DNA, from 1963 to today. I mean,
I think that 911 is probably one of the most iconic examples.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right, I'll give you that. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Good,
it's a great question. Love it. Thank you.
Do we have one more? Or are we gonna?
Let's leave that one for next week and come back to that one next week.
Okay. Are we like skirting all the actual criticism?
Well, it's late, and I think it would probably be worth it to give that one a little more time.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
So
all right,
we'll come back to Blake Swan next week.
All right, Blake.
We haven't forgotten about you, Blake. We're just gonna give it more time.
Yep.
You're on our radar.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. We gotta let us all go to bed now, so we can wake up and do it again tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, and one last thing. While we were recording this, I got a notice that the
Ford's canceling the Mustang.
The great pitcher Tom Seaver passed away at 75 years old from the New York Mets, 1969 World Series. I just had to. Well, I said, since you guys don't pay attention to sports, I just had to say that. So rest in peace, Tom Seaver.
Rebecca's favorite French restaurant in New York, Chez Steve.
That's awesome.